Okay, welcome back today. You're joining me en route to Kuebunyane. So those of you who have been watching for a while will probably have seen Kuebunyane before. I don't believe that I've been here during the summer months, or I haven't filmed it. I've been here a lot, but I haven't filmed it since probably the winter time. So that'll be nice to see what it looks like with the green grass, and we're actually just coming out of a couple days of having really a lot of rainfall. So we're from this area to Kuebunyane to drop off some clinic supplies, and then I'll be making another stop after that. But what I wanted to do during this leg, or during this landing at Kuebunyane, is talk about one thing that to me has become one of the most useful habits that I've picked up and that I've made a part of my routine when landing, especially with this type of flying. This is probably the single most important thing that really improves my awareness and makes me a safer mountain pilot. So I want to talk about that as we go, and take you through the landing at Kuebunyane as well. We've got just a couple minutes here. So what I want to speak about is how important it is to check your ground speed on final approach. In fact, every leg of your pattern you want to be doing that, but making a habit of checking it on final approach is going to be one of the things that's really going to improve your awareness and really give you a much better idea of what the wind is doing, and that's going to help you judge the land and judge what to expect, and even make a decision as to which direction you should be landing. The first thing we need to do before we get to Kuebunyane is figure out our true airspeed. Okay, so what I'll do is just use an iPad-based E6B. I'm going to be landing at 7,500 foot with a QNH or altimeter set in 1025. Air temperature on the ground, I'm expecting it to be around about 15 degrees. And I know that my calibrated airspeed, when I'm at 60 indicated, I know that my calibrated with this aircraft is going to be around about 62. So once I put all that in, that's given me, with no wind, a true airspeed of 71. Okay, what that means is, if we have no wind, what I can expect on final approach is that my ground speed would be 71.
Okay, so for those who want to review what I'm doing here, I thought I'll take a break quickly and explain it. We've got lots of different airspeeds. The first one that we always start off with is our indicated airspeed. That's what we're reading here. So our indicated airspeed that I'm going to approach at is 60 knots. To get to our calibrated airspeed, we need to use the manual. Have a look in your manual and find what is the calibrated airspeed at that flap set and that indicated airspeed for your particular aircraft. What I use is 62 knots as my calibrated airspeed with full flaps, approaching at 60 knots. Then we're going to move on to get our true airspeed. Now that is a correction for pressure and temperature. Now there's a few ways to do that, but for me the easiest way is just to use a flight computer. That is going to give you your true airspeed, which in this case of working it out today gives us 71 knots. Which means if I'm approaching at 60 knots indicated airspeed, my true airspeed is 71. When there's no wind, true airspeed and ground speed are going to be the same.
Okay, and then I can take it from there. Obviously, if my ground speed is less than that, that means I've got a headwind, and more obviously shows me that it's a tailwind. So once I have that base figure, what my true airspeed is on approach, at this particular airstrip under these conditions today, I can work out what my wind vector is going to be. If you're flying something more modern, or especially with more modern avionics, chances are you've got a little wind velocity or wind vector indicator on your GPS, and that's great. Obviously you want to be looking at the tailwind or headwind section of that when you're on the final approach. But if you don't have that, in our situation we've got a GPS 430 which does not work out the wind vectors for you. You want to know what your true airspeed or at least what your ground speed and zero wind is going to be for that day, and from there you can pretty easily figure out what your wind vector is on final approach. The reason this is so important is if you're landing at a one-way airstrip, you may have somewhere where you have a limitation and you want to be aware of what to expect on your ground speed with that particular limitation. So we have a few places where we have a 7-knot tailwind limitation, and you want to know for that day what 7 knots is going to mean on your ground speed. So here we are coming up overhead Kuebunyane. I'm going to be preparing for the landing, and I'll talk through as much as I can specifically about this ground speed as we go. So I am also going overhead. I'm going to start to put in my flaps, bring my power back and get my mixture selector and aux pump is checked. We haven't landed here since the heavy rain, so I want to make sure that this runway is looking in good condition. That'll be the surface part of my wind lasso checks. So wind looks calm, length is briefed, it's 1915, that's in feet. The altitude is 7,500 foot, so I'm at 8.5 here, which is great. The slope is 2.5%, I'll be landing on an uphill, or at least planning to land on the uphill. The surface looks good, it's grass and dirt. It's had some rain, so I expect it to be a little softer than normal. And then the obstructions on short final, I have a ridge, which is not really an obstruction, but it is just worth noting. So that's my airstrip wind lasso. My abort for this runway is down and break-in by the second marker. If I'm not down and break-in by the second marker, I will abort. Alright, so here we go into our downwind leg. I'm going to start my descent as I'm going to beam the runway here. So basically, I was aware of this ground speed, the value of checking ground speed during final approach, but I had never really built it into my habits. And so flying here, I reached a point where I made it a habit that on final approach I get my checks done, check for a green light, which means my checklist is complete, and then I continuously check ground speed, airspeed, and runway. I'm scanning between those things as we approach. So here we are on base leg. I'm going to go with 30 degrees of flaps, checking my brakes, prop is in, and brakes and prop checked. Okay, and I've got 88 knots ground speed here. And I need to bring my airspeed back to 70. Okay, so knowing what the tailwind is or the headwind is going to help me just judge a little bit more of my flare, where I expect to touch down, what kind of performance I expect from the aircraft if we ever go around. All of those things I'm going to know about more of that as I get familiar with what my headwind or tailwind component is. Here we go on final approach. I've got my full flaps, cowl flaps are closed, checklist complete with a green light, so that's complete, and checking my airspeed at 60 and my ground speed at 71. So that means I've got at this point no wind at all. Okay, I'm a little low, still at 76, so a little bit of a tailwind. approach is stable, 73. Alright. So as you can see, as we continue in the approach, we keep scanning between the ground speed and the runway, airspeed and runway, keep those things going, and having that scan down to your ground speed is going to be really vital and really is going to help your approaches and your landings and just your general safety and decision making as well. Hope that's useful. Thanks for joining. I'll see you next time.